Hi, Alex. Welcome to the brand new podcast series from Ingram Micro Simplifying Services, where we aim to educate our partners about our channel-centric professional, managed and maintenance services. In today's episode, we will dive into how to get customer into cloud, be it assessment, design, deployment, or migration. As you know, I'm your host, Harpreet Narang, Head of Services Marketing at Ingram Micro. Before we dive in, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks very much. So I'm Alex Parkinson, Practice Manager for our Public Cloud division, sort of focused in the services area of the business. And my team, we have a remit across Ingram Micro EMEA, so we support service execution, across our partner base throughout the EMEA region. And ultimately, my team is positioned as sort of thought leadership, execution, delivery, so pre-sales all the way through to end execution for a partner. And in terms of the vendors we support, my team, or at least my responsibilities, sit across AWS and Microsoft.
Fantastic. So what does that end-to-end journey look like for the customer?
So if I break it down in a whistle-stop tour, just to start with, usually we would pick up from a pre-sales perspective. So supporting with scoping, quoting, understanding what a customer's requirement is and helping sort of bring that to fruition in terms of what the end solution will look like. We then move forward with assessment, then we move into the design portfolio, so helping bring that solution to life. Once the customer is comfortable, everything's signed off, we then move into deployment, so starting to build out capability in cloud, and then we move into more of a migration stage where we'll then start to deliver the heavy lifting side, so starting to make that opportunity or solution become a reality.
That's really good to know. So you mentioned pre-sales. If a customer wanted to start their cloud journey today, would that be a starting point?
Definitely. Yeah. So from our perspective, obviously we engage through our partner base. We support our partners delivering that pre-sales capability into their end customers. And typically we would invite an initial conversation where the customer joins, the partner joins. We initially look to understand, who the customer is, what they're all about, goals, aspirations. Then we'll dive into the technology specific. So understanding, what their specific requirements are. And from there, we sort of drill into technology-focused questions to explore that a little bit more. So we capture all the information we need to then put a scope of works and a quote together.
Great. Tell us a bit more about cloud viability assessment.
Yeah. So cloud viability assessment is a capability we have out in the marketplace at the moment. It's vendor agnostic. So for us, can cover both the AWS and Microsoft portfolio, and usually it's our start point where we're talking cloud migration, cloud transformation. One, because it's a fully funded piece of work typically that the vendor, as in Microsoft or AWS, will cover the costs for us to deliver. Two, there's no obligation service as well, so everything we deliver for a customer, regardless of the outcome, as in they move forward or they don't, we're comfortable, the vendor's comfortable that we invest and deliver that service, so the customer still has a sense of comfort in that they're not brought in and have to move forward through that assessment. But ultimately, if we look at what the assessment is at its core, it's one, supporting customers in building that case for change within their own environment, and zooming into both commercial and technical viability. So we look at what they have today, and from a commercial and technical perspective, how viable is it for them to transition into the cloud?
Which makes a lot of sense for the customer, but how does the partner benefit from this?
So from a partner perspective, a little bit different, definitely. I think the biggest thing we look at is probably pipeline to revenue realization. So for our partner base, the majority of them are measured on the annual recurring revenue they bill through the business. It's the same for us as a distributor as well. And what we see is these cloud viability assessments generate and grow the pipeline towards that revenue. So the cloud viability assessment is stage one in a multi-stage process that will then see a customer consuming services in the cloud, which is where the revenue dips in. And what we can say quite confidently is, of all of the assessments that we execute, we have a reasonably high conversion rate. I believe it sits around 67% at the moment.
That's quite high.
So yeah, definitely. We have a very good success rate in that sense, and that sits across both clouds, across Microsoft and AWS. But yeah, definitely from a partner perspective, it's that pipeline to revenue realization, and obviously the knowledge that we can deliver it from an Ingram Microservices perspective on the partner's behalf, so they don't have to put any investment or lay out any costs for that initial start point.
Which is, I think, a huge win for the partners when it comes to augmenting their portfolio and scaling up their business.
Definitely.
So a partner listening to us now, what would be the immediate next step for them if they are interested?
Yeah, so I would say definitely reach out to your BDM, have a conversation with them. If it is the cloud viability assessment that you're interested in, we can get one of our services BDMs, one of our technical team on a call to help bring that proposition to life. But equally, we have, we'll call it a starter pack for partners that covers everything they would need to know around the cloud viability assessment. So, let's start with a conversation. We can talk you through it, but we can share the pack, which details things like, the recommended telemarketing script if they're calling out to their customers. It covers off objection handling, so the typical nuances we come up against in conversation and how we navigate around those. But also there's a nice first call deck that they can sort of co-brand, rebrand, and also the example sort of output report of what their customer can expect as part of that assessment in terms of the tangible output.
Absolutely. And I think in addition to that enablement collateral, we also run workshops for the partners.
Definitely.
So if there is a partner who has multiple customers, are we able to then run a bespoke workshop for them and their customers?
Yeah, definitely. From our side, we would cover that as a pre-sales piece of work. So what we'd say to the partner is, you bring the customers, we can work collectively on a sort of co-branded message, unless they're happy with the Ingram fronted piece that we have available. But ultimately, then we can co-deliver that messaging into their end customers to help their customer set understand the value of the cloud viability assessment and why it is really a good start point for their cloud journey. And regardless of where the customer is on the journey, it generally tends to be a really good start point. So it could be that they've never considered cloud. It could be that they've started a transition, but they still have a long way to go, and we can target the assessment specifically to what they have within their on-premises environment today and haven't moved across.
So for those partners who haven't moved to cloud, what would be some compelling reasons for them that they need to start thinking about it today?
It's a very good question. I guess it's a different narrative where we talk partners versus customers. I think the end customer piece is possibly easier to answer, and I think that the best way to address that, there are so many different values that moving to cloud brings, but security being one, the security posture we can build around an environment in the cloud tends to be far greater, far stronger than we can from an on-premises perspective, albeit a very different model in terms of how we manage security. But equally, the scalability, the flexibility, if you have an on-premises environment, you're constrained by the number of resources you have within your data center, for example. And if you need extra resource, you're having to buy additional hardware. Whereas in the cloud, if we needed extra resource around the busy periods, Black Friday being a great one, you can scale it up for that period, pay the difference, and then scale it back down. So it's not an ongoing cost. It has a lot of flexibility across all of those different areas. Obviously, from a partner perspective, it's a little bit different. I would say the biggest thing, if we look at the two clouds we're looking at, is the revenue side of things. So, as we transition end customers into Azure, into AWS, there's the back-end billing side of things, the rebates that a partner will make, but also how we can then accelerate that profitability through overlaying services.
Absolutely. And the good thing is that Ingram Micro is here every step of the way to support the partners and
Definitely.
their end customer. You mentioned Azure and AWS. Is there a use case that you can talk us through?
For both vendors, for either vendor, I mean, many, I guess. I mean,
Pick the top one.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time it ties back to compelling events. One that is particularly prevalent, I guess, is end of support for certain operating systems. We've gone through many iterations of Microsoft SQL Server, Windows Server, coming to a point in time where the operating system is no longer supported. And there's, that creates a great compelling event because there is a need for change at that point in time. And, if we look at starting with a cloud viability assessment, one, we can help analyze and understand what licenses they have today, what is nearing that end of support sort of viewpoint, but then we can help them understand what that journey to cloud could look like. So rather than, maybe keeping SQL Server, for example, we can move to databases natively in Azure that don't necessarily need that license. So different ways we can look at transitioning, but I would say, always comes back to compelling event. Another really good one at the moment is the sort of Broadcom acquisition, the change in that license model, license portfolio. There's uncertainty in the marketplace for obvious reasons, and some of those customers that are not choosing to stay with Broadcom under the new licensing portfolio are, again, prime candidates to go in and talk to about cloud viability assessment and the sort of longer term journey into the cloud.
Perfect. So for a partner to be able to offer this services wraparound to the end customers and, obviously the impact this can have on their business growth is very obvious. Are end customers also starting to expect this now?
Yes. It depends on your viewpoint. I mean, I work in cloud, so the majority of the end customers I come up across are all on that journey, so they're transitioning towards cloud. What I would say is we're seeing less that are kicking back with, I need to stay on premises for X, Y, whatever those reasons may be. It tends to be that we can put a very, very compelling story together in terms of why they should transition across. Don't get me wrong, there is still hybrid environments we work in where there are certain maybe line of business applications that customers want to keep on premises, but as a sort of broad scale perspective, I would say people are definitely asking for these types of services. And if you look at cloud viability assessment, ultimately understanding what that cost would look like, both running costs and the cost of change before you make a commitment, I think is the value add that we bring.
Absolutely. And I think those who still aren't, it's a case of creating that awareness and educating them why they should be considering that. Because as you said, there are some very compelling reasons to be adding services as a wraparound to the product or solution, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah.
Also, Copilot Adoption Factory is something we've talked about in the past, and it is our unique service that helps partners and customers adopt Microsoft 365 Copilot. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, definitely. So obviously Copilot is quite a big topic. There's quite a lot of excitement still around Copilot, the value it brings into end businesses, and I think one of the things that was maybe missing in the market last year was driving true adoption across Copilot. So a lot of excitement, a lot of people wanting to buy initial licenses to have a play, have a test. Whether it was excitement around what the product can do or just wanting to have the latest toy, I don't think we'll ever know. But this year, I think that focus has shifted slightly. So rather than looking at buying in 2s and 3s, small licenses, we're wanting to drive more valuable adoption. So the Adoption Factory we have in the marketplace today covers a couple of different pieces. So one is focused around the technical readiness state of an environment. So are you technically ready in terms of the environment, security posture, whatever that may entail, but also now focusing on the business side of things as well. So is the business ready to adopt Copilot? So looking at people, processes, the transformational change and how we drive true adoption. And with that, we've just brought out a new services proposition that ties together, I think, the best of what we do from a distribution perspective, so the licensing portfolio, but also how it overlays into the services piece, to cover off a couple of different things, I guess. One, showcasing to our partners that they can be far more profitable with, services such as Copilot, where they're overlaying value-add professional services as well, so, additional profitability, but also helping those partners secure the year-on-year revenue. So if we look at maybe just selling a license, we're then solely reliant on the end customer realizing the value themselves, and if they realize the value, they'll reinvest, they'll buy more licenses or renew their licenses at the end of the year. If they don't, they'll turn them off. Whereas when we overlay services, we can support driving that value realization through the Adoption Factory, which one, helps secure the year-on-year business, but two, opens the door for services upsell, licenses upsell, where we're looking at, maybe we start with a 15-user pilot and it's a 30, 45 seat business. So there's scope to grow that if the value is realized. But also then when we zoom into things like the security posture and how important that is when we talk Copilot, there's also potential upsell motions for transitioning to business premium enterprise licenses with security attachments, just to make sure that the environment is as secure, stable and compliant as it could be.
And that is such a holistic way of being able to leverage this opportunity, especially when, you talked about the business readiness as well. So we are going outside of that immediate framework and understanding the impact and maximizing the impact for the entire business, which I think is a huge value add.
Definitely. I think Copilot is interesting in a way, because if you look at the base Copilot license, is very much targeted on driving individual productivity, but the more recent stuff that's come out, if we look at the extensibility side, Copilot agents and bits, it's then starting to look at how we can pull all these pieces together to drive, true transformation across sort of the broad scale business as opposed to just the individuals.
Perfect. Any final kind of insight or message would you like to share with our partners?
I guess from my side, I know we've talked about cloud viability assessments a lot. What I would say is assessment is always a really good place to start, regardless of where a customer is on their journey, whether they're on premises, whether they've moved to the cloud and looking to move to, a different vendor, for example. We can come in, typically deliver this fully funded pre-sales activity to help you, understand what the transition path would look like, how much it's going to cost, what type of funding we're able to leverage from the vendor to offset that journey, and ultimately to support our partner base growing their own pipeline for migration and future modernization within their customer base.
Exactly. And just to reiterate, any partner interested in, learning more about the services, they simply need to be in touch with their BDMs and reach out to yourself, perhaps.
Definitely. I mean, ultimately, we're here to support regardless of partner maturity. So if you don't do cloud today, we can support the end-to-end journey. If you have your own cloud practice, your own technical resources, we're here to support, advise and guide. We can be thought leaders. We can be here just to give you burst capability. So ultimately, we're here to plug the holes that you have within your own services capability.
Absolutely. And ultimately, we are here to drive that value to our partners.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, Alex, for joining me today. And this is not where the story ends, because this is a whole series which will take our partners through to the entire life cycle of services we have. So there's going to be another episode after this on managed services. So stay tuned in for that one.